Good morning and welcome to Global Perspectives. I'm David Dumke.
And I'm Katie Coronado. Welcome.
Today we are joined by Doug Wise, the former Deputy Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Mr. Wise is also a veteran of the CIA and an Army officer. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you very much. I enjoy being here. It's an honor and a pleasure.
We want to start by talking a little about the Intelligence Committee's performance in the Ukrainian crisis. You read a lot of news stories and you hear how great U.S. intelligence has been. They've been right on the money. And I can't help but to compare this to Afghanistan and Iraq, when the intelligence community was blamed for having a lot of wrong assumptions, whether it was on weapons of mass destruction or other threats.
Well, I think we should all, as Americans, be proud of how well the women and men of the U.S. intelligence community did, and as well as our international partners that helped us in producing highly relevant, high impact, and very accurate intelligence for the President of the United States, and the unprecedented use of that intelligence by the President in terms of informing the American people about why he's making certain decisions and helping foreign leaders use that same intelligence to inform their citizens of why they're making certain decisions. So I think the timeliness, the accuracy, the quality of the intelligence reflects a long period of lessons learned by intelligence professionals. I think it also reflects a deep sense of collaboration and cooperation across the many agencies of the IC, as well as the disciplines within each agency, CIA across the Operational Directorate, Analytic Directorate, and the Science and Technology Directorate. And quite frankly, I think it was, really, really interesting to see that the President had such tremendous trust and confidence in that information that he was willing to expose it not only to our allies, but he was also willing to expose it to Vladimir Putin in the hopes that Putin would, in fact, give pause and perhaps make a change from his intent to invade the nation of Ukraine. So just a tremendously good job done, well done, years of preparation for that, talent in the workforce, and a really good sense of cooperation and collaboration. And I think it's a reflection also of the composition of the workforce. I think it's the multicultural, very experienced workforce across the IC. So back to your question, though, on the contrast to that in the run-up to Iraq. What you found in the run-up to the Ukraine war is you found no political meddling, and you found no political influence in the collection of intelligence. Where in Iraq, you had the Bush administration had already made a decision to invade, and then was putting pressure on the intelligence community to actually produce intelligence that conformed with the pre-made decision, so that you didn't have a conflict of, intelligence contravening, political decisions. And so the Iraq war is a great example of the hazards and the risks of politicization of intelligence, whereas in the Ukraine situation, I think you had President Biden just let the intelligence community do what we pay them to do, which is produce world-class, accurate, timely, and useful intelligence. And so total study and contrast. And so I'm very impressed and very proud of my colleagues who continue to serve the nation so well.
You spoke about the importance of exposure, and with the importance of social media when it comes to communication, how do you see the role of the intelligence agencies when it comes to seeing what's coming out of Russia right now, for example, information-wise?
Yeah, I think it's important. One of the things that we deal with in the intelligence community, in the classified domain, particularly in the collection of intelligence through very sensitive, very perishable, and classified means, is quite frankly, the more sensitive it is, almost assuredly, the narrower is the scope of the information. Whereas we have now learned, quite frankly, and it's been a difficult transformation, I think, culturally, to accept the value of non-classified information, which is the bulk of the information that's playing out in the Ukraine crisis. And so you could see where tremendous, how adroit the Ukrainians are in manipulating the information. And they're going against the Russians, who are world class in information warfare. The Ukrainians are just trumping them at every step in the information war. But in the business of collecting intelligence, the amount of information that's available that turns out to be preeminently useful is predominantly non-classified information. It's all out of social media. It's out of non-social but media. And it's all in the print, and it's all online, it's on television, it's all in the spoken word, the exchange of informations and conversations and text messages across the board. So the tremendous volume of data that is available to the United States intelligence community is extraordinary. It's also an extraordinary and daunting challenge to process and to winnow that down, to homogenize, pasteurize, add value to it, and package it in a way that somebody like yourself, as a senior official, could make an informed decision. So very great work on the part of the intelligence community. And this is a unique situation, I think, where you find that, this is an internet war. And I'm not talking about hacking. This is a war that's playing out on the internet. And it shows the power, and it shows the strengths and the weaknesses of that as well. I think it's fascinating.
You've worked as a professional security official for almost 50 years. So you've seen a lot of change. You're talking now about a lot of this being online, and you're following all the material you were just talking about. What are some of the other changes you've seen over time, and how have they been shaped by the threats that presented themselves at different points?
Well, I think the changes in CIA, I think, and I will just limit this to CIA, but it's also expandable to the U.S. intelligence community as well. I think from the time I entered CIA, which was in the late 1980s, to now, I think are two major things that have dramatically transformed, or that the intelligence community at CIA in particular has dramatically transformed. One of them is the sense and the spirit and the practice of collaboration and cooperation. So in pre-9/11, what you had were individual fiefdoms, you and I call them agencies and departments of the U.S. intelligence community, who were in their own isolated information and operations ecosystem, and the tribal culture, and there were, in some cases, impermeable boundaries that were intentionally created through compartmentation and dealing with sensitive information. Right. Another reason why open source information is so valuable, because you can actually transact with it, But the reality is that, compartmentation, need to know, was dominant. And so we set up the structures, we set up the culture to keep our information, and there was very little need to share. And then 9/11 happened, and 3,200 Americans were killed on that fateful day. And then in the aftermath of that, we discovered that there was information available. Whether we could have taken that information, combined it across the agencies and departments to have been able to take actions to preempt the attack, we'll never know. And I think the 9/11 Commission report calls that out and says the lack of sharing, the lack of cooperation, the lack of collaboration was an existential impact to the existence of the 9/11 attack. And again, they also caveat that by saying no one will ever know whether we're able to preempt it. So in the aftermath of 9/11, not only the structures, of course we created the DNI, right? The structures of the U.S. intelligence community, the process, the cultures, all dramatically transformed so that we all felt more comfortable, and we felt an obligation to share appropriately and to use information to enable our colleagues' success, whether it was internal to CIA, for me as a Director of Operations Officer, to enable the success of our analytic colleagues, or vice versa. And so we made a dramatic change. So from the late 1980s to 2022, it is a way different structure, it's a way different culture, and it's a way different way of doing the intelligence business. And I think that, in great measure, was a way to answer your first question, which was, what about that intelligence that President Biden used in the run-up to the invasion. The second biggest thing was back in the late 1980s, if I would have walked into a large meeting room, I would have seen all white males. There would have been very few females in positions of responsibility and authority, and most of them would have been in administrative jobs, and there would be almost no officers of color. And so the intelligence community recognized, we didn't understand it then because the system kind of worked. We were just going against the Russians, and we really didn't need, I guess, a multicultural workforce and a broad perspective and different lenses to view the existential threat posed by the Soviet Union. So I suppose that monoculturalism inside the intelligence community worked for the target and the environment at that time. But the world now today is interconnected, very complex. And what you have are complex existential threats, which require complex solutions and mitigation to those threats. And no one agency can provide the solution. You got to work together, and you got to have a global perspective. And so having a multicultural workforce, officers who have lived in foreign environments, that are multilingual, that can help you view an issue and help you develop solutions from a whole different perspective than an old-time mainstream way of doing business. Because in the end, you are trying to create solutions that have to have foreign cultures and foreign history and foreign politics baked into those solutions, or they won't have the effect that you want to have. And if you don't have a workforce that has been exposed, that has deep expertise linguistically, historically, educationally, you're not going to get a solution that's going to be very helpful. So if you notice, both of those things kind of work in tandem, right? Because that transformation, the collaboration, the cooperation, that increases your perspective, okay? And it increases the likelihood that I'm going to feel comfortable offering my perspective on a given issue. And so I think both of them happening arguably slowly to those that were wanting a faster transformation. But I think arguably we're in a good place by having gone through those two kinds of transformation, I think. So it's a totally different intelligence community than the one I entered in 1987.
You mentioned the word transformation a lot, which leads me to, do you think that there's a correlation between what's happening with cryptocurrency and what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, that situation?
Well, I think I saw in the news media today that because of the financial stress and the financial limitations, because of the SWIFT-related decisions and sanctions, that transacting in traditional currency, whether it's electronic or physical, has become much more difficult. And so cryptocurrency, albeit because you have an observable ledger, the fact of the matter is that the owner of the actual transaction can be easily concealed. And so it's no surprise to me that the Russians, being adaptable in very malevolent and malicious ways, would no surprise to me. I mean, terrorists had adapted and adopted that currency. Narco-traffickers had done that. Organized crime had done that. And so no surprise that the Russian Federation wouldn't have used that as an adaptation a tool to the imposition of sanctions and financial stress. I think no surprise to me.
So I want to ask you something specific again that's in the news when we talk about Russia and Ukraine conflict, and that's, there's been a lot of speculation about Vladimir Putin's psyche at this point. And as you know, it's always been important especially for some American leaders. You read about Camp David, for example, and President Carter studied the psychological profile that the CIA had compiled about Sadat and Begin and some of the other leaders in the region, and that was very important to how you dealt with them. You look at Vladimir Putin as a former KGB agent before he became mayor of St. Petersburg and president of Russia, and a lot of people are saying, what's he thinking now? So I wanted to ask you, that's a bit of old-fashioned intelligence, is getting the psyche of a world leader, that, especially one that's potentially malevolent like Putin. How important is that today?
Well, I think it is important trying to understand how Putin is going to make a decision. And one of the problems with us in trying to answer your question is that our default position is to view Putin, his behavior, the information that he would seem to be valuable, and the culture and background and how he makes his risk versus gain decisions. We look at that through an American lens. And we try to, even though it's not conscious, we end up projecting our own ways of thinking and ways of doing business and worship our own core values. We project that particularly onto Vladimir Putin. And so if we were Vladimir Putin, faced with the environment that he was facing pre-invasion, we would have said, as Americans, we would have said, no matter how important it is, and no matter how much of a desire I personally want to invade Ukraine, it's just not going to be worth it. It's going to be too risky. The second, third order effects, the global impacts, my economy is going to suffer, my people are going to suffer. And so that's the way we would think, right? And it happens all the time. You know, we view you, I'm viewing you through my eyes, and I'm judging you through my frame of reference, through my experience, through my culture, my ethnicity, all of that. I'm viewing your behavior and I'm making a judgment. And that's what we do with Putin. And I think we tried to default to the most hopeful assessment of him and say, the cost is going to be extraordinary. Exactly what we've done post-invasion could have been anticipated pre-invasion and was perfectly available to Putin. All of what we've done so far was perfectly available to Putin to use in his risk versus gain the decision making. And we would have said, maybe there are other ways to accomplish this objective, and maybe we'll just wait and do this some other time. I've got asymmetric tools, I got diplomatic tools, I got, you know, in Western Europe, I got economic tools, maybe not on America, but, and so we presume that Putin would in fact be rational and reasonable from the U.S. perspective. He's being perfectly rational and reasonable from a Russian perspective. Right. And we lost that. We weren't able to see that. Our own national bias and our own cultural bias, I think, kind of blinded us to that. And we're not the only ones. I mean, obviously the Ukrainians were more biased because the Ukrainians actually believe that their brothers across the border would never resort to the behavior we're seeing. Even Ukrainians were shocked and surprised that their brothers were willing to behave in this way. And I found it to be interesting. I did a lot of time in the Balkans, and I was dealing with the genocidal mess that came out of the Balkans. And so it was the same kind of thing, that all of a sudden, for hundreds of years, your village was perfectly fine, multicultural, and all of a sudden one day, your neighbor was slaughtering your neighbors. And trying to figure out, was there a psychopathic element to that? Was there, you know, collective mental illness? You know, what was the psychopathy that was underpinning all that? And it just turns out to be a mystery because I look at my neighbors and say, oh, my neighbor's going to act just like me. And you can either look and say, he's going to be just as compassionate as me, or you can be just as violent as I intend to be. And so that's the way, that's what we're dealing with. And why nobody should have been shocked. 2017, Putin said, Ukrainian is essentially, my words, an unauthorized country that was originally part of Russia, and all I'm doing is bringing it back as part of my long-term plan to recreate Imperial Russia. And so I am doing this for Ukraine. And we just can't see that. We're saying, you're doing it to Ukraine, right, not for Ukraine. And we as Americans find that, you know, difficult because we generally try not to do things to our foreign partners unless they so richly deserve it. But, you know, we try to do things for. I think that's very American. Yeah, Putin is not.
How do we increase our level of being prepared in the intelligence agency? Do you see an increase in hiring people with more Russian expertise, language skills, psychology, to be able to understand what he's thinking or what's going to happen next?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. because the intelligence community, like the military, you know, the old aphorism that says, yeah, the military is always preparing for the last war,
right,
and not the future war. And the intelligence community suffers a bit with that too. I mean, it wasn't so recently that we had a massive investment across the community in counterterrorism. Why? Because Russia wasn't exactly a meddlesome, risky state, and China was mounting the largest espionage operation in the history of the human race directed against us. But the fact of the matter is that it was terrorism because it was very emotional, very visceral. On TV, Americans died on the homeland, all that. And so we made all the investment in trying to mitigate that threat. And then we had great powers emergence, I guess a better word, right? We had China coming, you know, very fast and in large scale on the world stage. Russia was kind of sitting in its own little, you know, political national ecosystem. And so neither of those in the beginning were compared to the threat posed by terrorism. And so we begin to adapt. Now we're dealing with a Russian issue. But I think we're also, what we're learning out of this is we're now seeing how much more complicated, much more stressed the rest of the world was. Everything was really nice. It was working well. And all of our partners and all of our allies, sure, we disagreed on different issues, and there's always national interests involved that trump multilateral and maybe even treaty issues. But the fact of the matter is that now we find that the world's a lot more complicated, and we need a lot of different kinds of people with different backgrounds and different histories and different skills who bring their own unique and different aspects to helping us develop the solutions and helping us characterize, you know, what we're actually seeing, so we don't go through what we just talked about, which is, I'm I'm overusing the word culture here in this discussion, but our cultural blindness. We get the American blinders off and put our global blinders on, our global glasses on, so we can see with a little more clarity. I think it's important. But anyway, the workforce is transforming in ways that I already described, but I am confident that the intelligence community will be avaricious and extremely hungry for officers that have Eastern European backgrounds, Eastern European expertise, and political science, to help us, develop intelligence that can inform policy.
Well, you're basically asking, you're giving me enough information to ask my next question. Is you're visiting Central Florida today and talking to students, so tell us a little about that mission that you have now.
Well, I think it's I think the University of Central Florida has an incredible program in the IC-CAE program. And the students today, and yesterday, quite frankly, were switched on, engaged, seemed to be inspired, very eager to learn. And so my role here is purely to bring a personal face to the business of intelligence, even if the students will look at me and go, it's kind of an old face, but the reality is that my job is no longer to recruit spies and generate intelligence. My job is, as best I can, is to be able to help programs like you have at the University of Central Florida to inspire the next generation of me. They don't have to look like me. They don't have to speak like me. They don't have to come from my background. But the reality is my job now is to serve as an example, to challenge, to get them excited, to help guide and mentor and coach. And there's a great program, world-class faculty here that's doing that. All of these faculty members have been just really welcoming to me personally, and they really care about the students. And so my passion to try to help the students, I do the same thing for the University of New Mexico, where I live, but my passion is really their passion. And so the faculty is really world-class and really cares about the same thing I do, which is preparing these students, exposing them to opportunities, seeing and helping to guide them into a path that they find that they have passion in, and we hope that's the national security passion. Do
you have any opinion on putting on our global glasses and analyzing countries that are surrounding, for example, the state of Florida that may be partners or friends or allies of Russia at this time?
Are you asking whether I'm concerned about that?
Whether you're concerned and what your perspective is from an intelligence perspective. You talked about global glasses, so we're in Florida, and I wanted to know your perspective on our surrounding, countries.
Well, I think the obvious surrounding countries to the southern part of America is clearly Cuba and Mexico, and I would argue Central and South America. And I think that through hundreds of years of American involvement in Central and South America, I think there's been a little bit of exploitation, colonialism, and I think even though one would argue that that was long in the past, I think generations of development through Central American and South American families, I think America has to do some repair work, I think, down in with our southern friends. And so being able to do that, I think, is very important. And, like this university, I suspect, probably has a healthy population of foreign students, which I presume that, some people object to. I think it's a tremendous opportunity to help them see us from the inside, to help dispel their own mythology and their own biases, to test those biases. I think that's absolutely important. And the ways you're going to do that is the same way they acquired those biases, through experience and learning. And have them learning new things, I think, is very important. And I think, whether they're Cuban Americans, whether they're real Cubans, whether they're Mexican Americans, whether they're Mexicans, whether they're Guatemalans, Hondurans, Brazilians, Venezuelans, I think, the more they learn about the real America, they'll slowly divest themselves of the America that they think they know rather than the America that they experienced. So I think that's the benefit of having foreign students on a campus like UCF. I think it's great.
Well, Doug, believe it or not, our time is already over. We really appreciate you joining us today. It's a fascinating conversation. I hope it can continue again in the future, and you're always welcome back here. Thank you for your time.
Well, this is a great program. I'm glad you do this because I think it's important to the community, important to the university. So thank you for devoting your personal time and professional time as well to make this possible. So anyway, thank you very much. It's an honor.
And thank you for joining us today. We'll see you again next week on another episode of Global Perspectives.